Sometimes the people who want love the most are the ones who need space before they can receive it. You might feel it when someone gets emotionally close. They text with warmth. They ask how you really are. They stay. And instead of relief, your body tightens. Not because they did something wrong, but because closeness starts to feel like pressure. So you pull back. You answer later. You need a day, sometimes more. And then the question follows. Why does distance feel safer than comfort? The answer is not that you are cold. It is that your nervous system may be translating closeness through an older map. For some people, safety does not begin with connection. It begins with control. That is why intimacy can feel confusing. You can like someone deeply and still feel an urge to disappear the moment they become consistent. The lived experience is usually quiet. A kind message makes you tired. A caring question feels intrusive. Someone noticing your mood makes you want to hide. So you become careful. You reveal a little, then retreat. You stay warm, but not fully reachable. You keep one part of yourself outside the room. Over time, this becomes identity. You tell yourself, I'm just independent. I'm bad at closeness. I need a lot of space. But the pattern usually goes deeper than that. Your mind starts treating closeness like something that may cost you something. Your peace, your control, your emotional balance. And when the brain predicts cost, it prepares distance before pain arrives. That is why this pattern can protect you and isolate you at the same time, which is also why shame does not solve it. You are not broken because your first instinct is space. You may be using a strategy that once made emotional life more manageable. If closeness used to feel unpredictable, disappointing, overwhelming, or emotionally expensive, your system may have learned one quiet rule. Do not need too much. Do not reveal too much. Do not rely too much. That rule can look strong. Sometimes it even feels mature. But many adaptations are like armor, useful in a storm, heavy in sunlight. So the goal is not to hate the armor. The goal is to notice when it is protecting you from the present and when it is only replaying the past. To do that, you need to understand what is happening underneath it. Your brain is always asking one silent question. Is this safe enough? When closeness begins, several things happen at once. Part of the brain looks for emotional threat. Part of it compares the present moment to older experiences. And another part tries to make sense of what is happening and calm the reaction. You can think of it like this. One part is the smoke alarm. One part is the memory file room. And one part is the calm editor. If older experiences taught your system that closeness leads to pressure, disappointment, or loss of control, the smoke alarm may go off before the calm editor has time to speak. So you do not simply choose distance in a logical way. You feel a body-level shift. Less openness, more tension, less emotional access, more need to create space. This is why distance is often misunderstood. It can look like disinterest, but sometimes it is not a lack of feeling at all. Sometimes it is external calm built on internal alarm. That is why someone can care deeply and still need to step back. Why someone can miss a person and still avoid replying. Why someone can want connection and still feel trapped by it. A simpler way to understand it is this. Your nervous system may be like a narrow doorway. Safe closeness can enter, but only in small amounts. If too much comes too fast, the doorway jams. The problem is not always connection. Sometimes it is dosage. Which means healing is not about forcing openness. It is about teaching the body that closeness can arrive without flooding you. That changes everything. Because once you stop seeing yourself as cold, distant, or defective, you can finally work with the pattern instead of fighting it blindly. The first step is to slow the pace without disappearing. When you feel the urge to withdraw, ask for structure instead of vanishing. You can say, "I need a little time to settle, but I want to come back to this." This works because uncertainty makes the brain more defensive. Predictability lowers alarm. When the mind knows what is happening next, it does not have to brace as hard. So you still create space, but you do not turn space into rupture. That one difference matters. The second step is to name the state before you trust the story. Ask yourself, am I actually unsafe or am I overwhelmed? This matters because the brain often confuses activation with truth. A stressed body can produce a fast explanation like, "This person is too much," when the deeper issue is that closeness activated old alarm. When you name the state, you interrupt the automatic story. You give yourself a few extra seconds of awareness. And sometimes those few seconds are enough to stop the pattern from taking over. The third step is to practice small exposures to safe honesty. Not full disclosure, not emotional dumping. Just one honest sentence, a little earlier than usual. That works because avoidance brings quick relief, but it also prevents the brain from learning anything new. If you always withdraw, your system never gets evidence that openness can end differently. But one small moment of honesty can start updating that expectation. Instead of saying, "I'm fine," you might say, "I'm quiet today, but I do appreciate you checking in." That sentence may look small from the outside, but internally, it does something important. It teaches the body that vulnerability does not always end in collapse. The fourth step is to separate closeness from engulfment. For many people, these two things got fused together a long time ago. Closeness started to mean pressure. Need started to mean weakness. Care started to mean obligation. So even healthy connection can feel invasive. That is why boundaries matter so much. Boundaries are not walls. They are definitions. They tell your nervous system what shape connection will take, how much contact feels steady, what kind of communication helps you stay present, what pace leaves room for choice. When intimacy has shape, it feels less threatening than when it feels limitless. And that helps the body stay in the room. So the deeper goal is not to become someone who never needs space. It is to teach your alarm system the difference between closeness and danger. That is the real work. Not force, not self-blame, not pretending you are more open than you are. Just repeated evidence that connection can include pace, boundaries, and choice. When you slow the pace, name the state, risk one honest sentence, and define the shape of closeness, your brain starts receiving a new message. I can stay present without disappearing. I can have space without cutting the bond. I can be close without being consumed. That is how the doorway widens. Not all at once, just enough for safety to enter with the connection. And that is usually how healing looks. Quiet, unseen, repetitive. Small changes that seem almost invisible until one day you realize you did not run the way you used to. Some people do not need distance because they do not care. They need distance because somewhere in their history, space became the only place their nervous system could breathe. There is nothing shameful about that. But healing begins when distance stops being the only place you can breathe. You do not have to rush yourself into closeness, and you do not have to judge the part of you that still flinches. You only have to become more honest about what your system is protecting and more deliberate about showing it that safety can exist in connection too. Because the opposite of fear is not always closeness. Sometimes the opposite of fear is choice. And when choice enters the room, distance no longer has to do all the protecting.